BRICS bloc of developing economies, United Arab Emirates, I should say, Argentina, Egypt and Ethiopia are also set to join the bloc from 2024. The announcement was made at the BRICS summit in Johannesburg by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, whose country is the current BRICS chair. BRICS is currently made up of the emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Those 5 members agreed at last week's summit to expand Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Let's listen in.
The Argentine Republic, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates to become full members of BRICS. The membership will take effect from the 1st of January 2024.
I would like to congratulate our new members who will start working in a full-scale format next year. I would like to assure all our colleagues that we will continue the work that we have started today, expanding the influence of BRICS in the world. I'm referring to the establishment of practical work with new members of the organisation and with those who will work in the BRICS sphere as outreach, with our partners who in one way or another pay attention to cooperation with our organisation and would like to work with us together.
The expansion is also a new start for the BRICS operation, which will inject new impetus into the BRICS cooperation mechanism and further strengthen the power of world peace and development.
For multilateral institutions to remain truly universal, they must reform to reflect today's power and economic realities and not the power and economic realities of the post-Second World War. In the absence of such reform, fragmentation is inevitable.
The relevance of BRICS is confirmed by the growing interest of other countries in joining our group. BRICS will continue to be open to new members.
All right, we want to see this Ethiopia being the country that from this side of Africa, the Horn of Africa, is also joining BRICS by January 2024. They will be joining BRICS, as you've heard also from that particular statement from the leaders there. We want to interrogate this issue with our panelists right now. And there's some comments just to read that we have Karuri Singh, former director and Emeritus Fellow of the South Asia Studies Center at India's University of Rajasthan, saying that the BRICS is an important organization of the 21st century. It is immune to the baggage of the Cold War and the polarity mindset. However, it is not intended as a counterweight to the G7, which is led by developed countries, Western-led military alliances such as NATO. It is the organization of emerging markets and developing countries which are in the global south. Therefore, it advocates global South solidarity for promotion of accelerated growth, sustainable development, and safeguarding multilateralism. BRICS is not anti or against other organizations, but it does promote the United Nations principles and objectives and realizes the UN vision through global solidarity. And we have also Exen Iraqi, our own here, quoting just him from the China Daily, where he had commented on the BRICS as well. And he said that one of the biggest impact of BRICS is that African countries are getting more confidence in the economic and political affairs because people now live in a multilateral world. Quoting him, he says, if Africa joins BRICS, I am sure they can do a lot. BRICS will give African countries another alternative, another model for development that is not the same as the Western model. He added that Africa suffered under colonialism for many years. However, he believed the BRICS will bring partners who will treat African countries as equals. So there will be a win-win situation, no one person winning and the other losing. And I think that is what makes BRICS very attractive to the African countries, he said. Let's just begin with you, Professor Kagwanja, on this latest development as well. So those sentiments by Singh and Professor Iraqi as well, from the University of Nairobi?
Let me make my own comments, not those from others.
Yes.
And
this is the intellectual.
You penned a piece last week.
So because I put a piece on the Brics last week.
Yes.
And I made a joke or something at the cheek that I was frustrated with the changes that took place in the Brics because they did not go the way I thought they would. First, because the word Brics is badly spelled out. BRICS is missing one letter, which is K, and that K is Kenya. So I thought they would collect the spellings by basically looking at the Oxford Dictionary and Cambridge Dictionary and say that we build using bricks. This other one is badly spelled out. Yes. But I don't blame them. It is Kenya that did not go for it because you cannot get what you don't want. And therefore, Kenya played the game, the normal Cold War games that you want to be a good a good boy, and you want to be neutral, or you want to look this and that, and we missed an opportunity that we'll regret for generations to come. And I mean, and what I mean by this is not by design, by the reality of what is happening globally. The G7 of today is not the G7 of the next 25 years. Yes. And this is not said by China, it is not said by India, by Russia, and it is not said by the enemies of the West. It is the thinking organizations of the West, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, among others, that are saying this. And therefore, what is the opportunity that we are losing as a country? The opportunity we are losing as a country, I wanted to capture, is that by 2050, the G7 of today will only have one member as legitimate, correct, and that is the United States. The other 6 members will be members of the BRIC, as it is as currently constituted. They will be in this order: China, India, those are the top countries in the terms of the economy. Then there will be the United States, followed by Brazil, Mexico, and Indonesia. Indonesia is number 4, and Mexico. Japan will I think come, and Russia. Russia is part of the 7. Japan will come later. So it's Germany, Britain, France will not be part of the G7. Yeah. So in the G7, in the next 25 years, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers and others, that's it. So this is an opportunity as a country that is looking forward to development you cannot miss. Now the other thing is this: even with the inclusion, let's look at the impact of the inclusion of these countries, including Ethiopia, into this very, very quickly. Obviously, 40 countries have applied to be members of this bloc. 22 have formally asked that they be included. And therefore, we're talking about 62 countries over and above what we have. And that tilts the function to be the largest organization outside the United Nations that we have in terms of membership. Look at the attendance of this body. 50 heads of state attended the body, this particular BRIC meeting. And when you look at its economic power, the economic power from January 24th, just looking at what countries produce, 36% of global GDP will be coming from this particular bloc. 36%. In terms of global population, the market, the consuming capacity, 47% going to 50.
Correct.
That will be the population that is in the BRICS. And finally, the driver of economies, that is the oil production. The group itself will have 43.1% of the global oil production. And within it, the largest producer of oil, Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the greatest consumer of oil, which is China. So what are we talking about? We will be ghettoized. We will be turned into a ghetto. So we need to basically trace our steps as a country and begin to see interest. Look at it. Ethiopia has hacked it. Politically, it might be having issues, but economically, it is going to hack it.
It's going to hack it because
the hegemon in this world today, and how can we provide alternative forms of international relations? The BRICS is not, I'm not saying it's a bad start. I think it's a good start. But I think what China is doing is pulling allies into its orbit, but those allies are not necessarily going to stick with China when push comes to shove.
Also, when you're talking about hegemony, isn't that why they are coming up? Because you say they don't seem to be having an agenda.
Yes, the great Mearsheimer.
But we can see one agenda is to actually de-dollarize.
Yeah.
The dollarization and have one common currency, and not rely on speak up the China Daily so that we can just read along together. Talking about the BRICS as well, this is what is on the front page of the China Daily today, and it says here, it looks like this, the BRICS offers, the World Watch by Tom Fordy there, that the BRICS offers a pathway to equality and fairness. I'll jump all the details there to just read a snippet of it, an excerpt. It says, unlike an institution such as NATO, let me highlight so that you can see where I'm reading. BRICS is not an alliance or ideological bloc. It does not compel its members to take sides. Rather, it is designed to represent and complement a shared pool of interest with a common goal of furthering development, sustaining national sovereignty, and also expanding global governance towards a multipolar environment. In a nutshell, BRICS is the opposite of hegemony. And for the past 400 years, the international system has been dominated by a select group of countries known as the West. Here is where we are. And it says, these countries have been able to maintain a hegemonic position that through colonialism allow them to attain monopolies on global financing, trade, investment, technology, and military power. They've used all this to sustain their positions and keep other countries down. Although this started off with the British, Spanish, French, Dutch, Portuguese, and German colonial empires in the 20th century, the baton was passed on to the United States, which has built a global order around itself and has become a hegemon. Under the system that the US has created, countries are openly able to attain development, which necessitates access to capital and export markets if they subjugate themselves to the military and the strategic goals of the US itself. For example, a nation that became wealthy through the 20th century, South Korea, was able to do so because it had effectively ceded aspects of its national and military sovereignty to the US. Dr. Kanenjak, maybe you can comment on that. I'll just continue with the rest of it, maybe after you comment.
Yes. I think before we started on this, Secretary General of the United Nations was making comments, and he was making a reference to the fact that the current international system that is based on the post-war world order, Second World War world order, is no longer working for the majority of the world. Post-1945 had, I think, less than 50 countries that were actually independent. Today we have close to, I think, 183 countries are members of the United Nations. So the world has changed. And he did speak to the fact that the new structure needs to reflect the changed economic and geopolitical realities. It is not something that is being cooked somewhere in Beijing. It is something that a lot of people have expressed concerns about. Our own president made a very powerful, presentation in a number of places, including, with Macron, with regard to the need to reform the multilateral institutions in ways that can actually profit countries, especially in the global south. As someone once said, that I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. And what I don't want is what is not working. And so this is an attempt to provide an alternative to an order that is so skewed to the...
What Hassan has said, that we also said it, but I think you read The Economist newspaper, because your tone was more of watering down the important...
Talking about being on the seat of the table, and this is where we want to move to where the G20 is, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi saying the country's role as the G20 host this year will focus on highlighting the concerns of the developing world and has proposed the African Union to become permanent member of the forum. We have, he says, quote unquote, a vision of inclusiveness, and with that vision, we have invited the African Union to become permanent member of the G20. Modi said this on Sunday as he addressed the Russian Business 20 Summit in New Delhi. The B20 is an industry event and part of the summit of the 20 leading rich and developing nations, which will be hosted in the Indian capital next month. If we may just run the pictures. Over 3 days, industry and policy leaders from around the world have discussed themes like building resilient supply chains, digital transformation, debt distress facing developing countries, and how to advance on climate change. And of course, we want also just to look at this particular development. Do we need a seat at the G20? I think Jeffrey Sachs as well has spoken quite about it, that it's high time that we also move to the G20. Hamidas, you can pick up with you.
Oh, Debal, last time I said the development model for South Korea had nothing to do with Asian values. It's precisely those statements there that shows how South Korea came into the orbit of the American hegemon, and how it was an example for the rest of the communist system in Asia, that if you did A, B, C, D, this is what would happen. So the statement is correct in that sense. It is absolutely clear when it says that there is no ideological connections, and that's precisely what I've been saying, that there's no ideological connection between the states and the BRICS, and that if I can make Kenyan viewers understand, although it's not in my faith, it's like, come we stay, and we don't get married. You come and stay with us, and in that way we have some benefits, but if our ideological nuances go astray, we can move back to the hegemon. So this is not creating an alternative to international relations. It is creating a situation in which there is a rentier international relations, where you can pop in on your national interest whenever you want. It is not, say, the third way or the second way. It is not what happened in the 50s between the United States and the Soviet Union, where you had Gamal Abdel Nasser and all the Nkrumah and all these other people providing an alternative to international relations. So I think that anyone who thinks that economic entitlements alone are going to make a punch in international relations is highly mistaken, because the very idea of international relations itself is ideological. It's a theory. International political economy is a theory of how you approach politics, how you approach institutions, how you approach trade, how you approach all these things. And unless that alternative is created, and I'm a big supporter of this African Renaissance in which we come together, build our economies, build our diplomacy, build our way of being, and produce a certain African pathway to history. But if we just want to go and sit in the Security Council as Kenya and say that we're going to endorse what India says or what China says, we're not players in the game. We're just spectators, and that's my
right. I don't know what books Hashi is reading.
I'm asking myself.
I'm wondering where you must have been reading the 1960s and 1970s textbooks.
Well, tell me your opinion. I'll reply.
It's not about our opinion.
No. I want to hear what you say, and then I'll reply.
Just the cows are grey, or I mean, these are.
The question that we have to answer is that, is the BRICS an alternative to the hegemon of the United States? That's the question we're asking. What's the question you're asking?
I thought we moved to the G20.
Yes. It's the same. Okay. Now let me put it this way. The first thing is, the age of hegemony is over. The theory of hegemony was propounded by Harvard scholars to explain how America was going to govern the world. And America did a very good job with its scholars. They constructed what we call the Transatlantic Alliance.
Yes.
Including North America, including Canada and Europe. That is the governing alliance. They constructed NATO as the military wing of that alliance. And they elevated the dollar as the currency of that hegemon. What we are saying, and we've been saying, is that that hegemony is collapsing. And it is not collapsing because of challenge from outside, but it is collapsing partly because of internal contradiction.
Like?
The Europeans decided they are going to have the euro to challenge the dollar. Trump came and trashed the NATO for 5 years. NATO was completely dysfunctional. 2, 3, the American power itself is in decline. That is very clear. There's no doubt about that. So the point, it is not dangerous. Let me say this. China is not an alternative to the US. India is not an alternative to the US. Brazil is not an alternative to the US. It is a world that is gravitating towards a multipolar, non-hegemonic world. So we are not going to have a policeman. So those who have no mind of a world without a hegemon must now start conceiving it.
I'm not propagating that.
No, we are not going to have a world with sheriffs.
I'm opposed to it. That's my sentiment.
Yes.
I oppose the hegemony.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that how are we constructing the alternative? The way we're doing it is through reform. What I'm saying is that there has to be a transformation of this international relation, not a reform of it. That's what I'm arguing.
Let's say from
Can I make my concluding remarks on that? Because he intervened. I am saying the BRICS is not an alternative to the Western hegemony, American Western hegemony.
What is it?
What it is a group of the southern countries, the global south, trying to assert themselves in the global order, and that way reshuffling the world order. What comes out of it, nobody knows. Yes. But something is going to come out of it.
And I think it's important to dig deeper into what Hash is saying. That okay, the BRICS is not resting on the foundation is not ideologically driven.
Yes.
And that if you look at the ideology of the hegemony was very clear, because one of the values they espoused was democracy, in quotes, whatever it is, whatever it means, democracy. And those are the values today that continue to drive what you might call the Western Alliance. And this is where, when China started to ascend to be very strong, part of the hegemony was worried that yes, so alternatives, because there are some people who say fundamental freedoms are important for what? For prosperity. But there are people who also argue that prosperity is important, brings in fundamental freedoms. You understand that? You agree where I'm going? But here is what is happening now. The country, if you look at, even when UK was a superpower, it was because it was militarily and economically powerful. And so you cannot say economic doesn't drive. And that's why they were able to push the values. Unless then I misunderstood you. And I think you need to come out very clear. But coming to the G20, let's talk about the G20. The G20 is more of an economic platform. And for all I know, Africa, for instance, the chairman of the African Union and the rest have also been attending. But all they go is for a lunch break. When they have a lunch break, they invite them to come and address them, just like what they do at G7. So they have a side show. It's like an event within an event, where then they come and interact with them and say, they would bring 5 leaders from Africa and address some themes, but not necessarily mainstream. So what I hear this is being said, let Africa also be mainstreamed, so that those issues are on the table and are not being discussed during lunch break, as it is at the moment.
All right. All right.
What we're witnessing, even in the economic or rather hegemonic theory, is the inevitable rise of the rest that always disturbs the status quo. And there is no power or hegemon that has lasted forever. What we are seeing, even what's happening today in the Horn of Africa where we are from, is that the impact of the inevitable rise of the rest. You have a lot more players today than you had 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Now, economics drives geopolitics, has always driven geopolitics. And because of the changing nature, in the much of the last 25 to 30 years, the Asia-Pacific region has driven the world economy in terms of economic growth. And its impact is being felt. Now, as the economic progress is spread in parts of the global south, you can see these countries gaining muscle and seeking more agency in international relations and in multilateral institutions. And so what is happening is not a process that can be arrested. It's a process that cannot be controlled. But because of the reluctance or resistance of the old status quo, it is the reason why the Secretary General is worried of the potential chaos because of the system dysfunction. Why? Because there is no orderly way of ensuring that all these voices are accommodated and all these interests are managed in a way that can satisfy.
Right. We are winding up on it because of time. I think we need to close it. We've beaten it to the ground. We need to also focus on what is happening lately, especially with the Mali Wagner chief, that is Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was buried in a private ceremony in St. Petersburg. His official press service and state media said this yesterday on Tuesday. Less than a week after the jet he was on crashed, killing him and wiping out a number of top commanders in his paramilitary group. The funeral took place behind closed doors at Prokhorovskoye Cemetery in the city. The Concord Group said this on Telegram, the first time the group, which acts as Wagner's mouthpiece, has posted since June 26th, days after Prigozhin's short-lived mutiny. A shroud of secrecy surrounded the proceedings, which weren't broadcast or photographed. Only family and close friends attended. State media said this, adding that those were the wishes of the Wagner leader's family. Around 20 to 30 people were there. Local media reported the cemetery was closed to the public and guarded by police armed with anti-drone weapons on Tuesday evening. Footage from the site published by Reuters showed a black Wagner flag hoisted above a plot also guarded by Rosvagadier National Guard troops. The Kremlin earlier said Russian President Vladimir Putin wouldn't be attending. The funeral's timing and location weren't announced in advance. A news it had taken place was only released after his conclusion. Some news outlets had earlier reported 2 other different cemeteries as a possible location for the ceremony. Prigozhin, I should say, was killed when his jet crashed last week northwest of Moscow, 2 months after he led a short-lived revolt in June. And we just wanted to look at this as well, and the future of Mali, where we have the forces of Wagner there, where we had the president saying that will continue apace. Let's just... Is it Hashi? Okay.
So Debal, I think that it was written on the wall that Prigozhin was going to be was going to get killed. There was no question about that in my mind. He deeply embarrassed Mr. Putin, and he was going to come to some political or physical demise either way. And I am not alleging that the Russian state put something on the plane. But it is very clear to me that Mr. Prigozhin, who wanted to march into Moscow, tried to do an attempted coup d'etat, and he fought his own state, which was at war. So what has happened to Mr. Prigozhin doesn't surprise me at all. It just goes on to show you the kind of stakes that are in Ukraine and Russia today, and how committed these 2 powers are to making sure that this war ends in a lose-lose situation. And international relations today, Debal, is in flux because of this. Because the United States and Russia have not come to any kind of settlement. It's causing inflation, it's causing the economies to go to the doghouse. Debal, I think that this is a very disastrous signature for how we do politics in this world today.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Kanenje.
The Wagner chief's case is now that's what it truly means by taking someone to heaven. I think
you should have said that before. You should have said that in the beginning. I don't think you should use Prigozhin to say that now. You should have said that in the beginning.
That one is clear. He misbehaved. And, someone decided to take him to his creator. Yes. On Mali, there are other companies, military companies in Russia that are still going to be engaged in. It is beneficial for, I think, Moscow to stay engaged for them. They've been able to build allies there. But there's a bigger problem. I think as we were talking, Ambassador just shared some news. There is another coup in Gabon.
Yes.
And so the military has taken over.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering what Tinubu will say about that. You know, are they now going to turn guns on the old Bongo family, or what is going to happen? You know, the problem I think we're not talking about, it's not about the Wagnerites on the continent. It is, why are things happening the way they're happening, that we're having so many coups repeatedly? What is it that is missing? Two, what are the role of outsiders, and how can we be able to manage that so we can reduce the external influence and the way it's contributing to some of these instabilities? But fundamentally, how should we chart our way as Africans to be able to build these countries and institutions that can actually give hope to citizens and not inspire the kind of riotous behavior we have seen, either from the junior military officers or from the public? Because one of the things that is very clear, a lot of these coups also happen to be very popular on the streets. It means there's something that is fundamentally wrong, and we need to face ourselves in the mirror and answer to that question.
Right.
Yes.
Is it you?
Yeah.
I've lost my track.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as Hassan said, I just seen also on the media, social media, but it looks like the source is Al Jazeera.
Yes, it is true.
The source is Al Jazeera. And I think what you said is very fundamental. What has happened what lessons have we learned from the Niger coup? Are we seeing a resurgence of, when Macmillan said, wind of change is blowing across Africa? I see a new wind in Africa coming. Perhaps because people have become restless, that those of us who have been so comfortable with the status quo, and they're asking themselves, for how long? I mean, I know a little bit about Gabon. I can say much because my boss, my chairman, I worked with closely, was a presidential candidate, Ping, yes. And I saw what happened. But if you look at the scenario that is emerging, I think Europe and the rest need to go back to the drawing board and say, how are we going to engage Africa so that this doesn't become a disorderly way of what I might call the third world liberation. This is what I see that is emerging, and I'm not going to say much about it.
Fantastic. We should be winding up, and of course that is the breaking news right now, as we are just sharing here regarding the coup in Gabon, where we have it that a coup in Gabon as army officers declare nullification of election results in which Ali Bongo won, ending his family's 53-year hold on power. That is the breaking news that is coming to hand right now. And we're just talking about the litany of these coups in Africa, one after the other, one after the other. This is the latest in Gabon right now. Of course, we shall be unpacking that for you much later. The course of the day, make sure you tune in also to African Speak, where they will be talking more intently on this. But that is the latest development as well. Coup in Gabon as army officers declare nullification of election results in which Ali Bongo won, ending his family's 53-year hold on power. It had to take a coup to actually break that particular
I predicted this
Gordian knot as well.
I predicted these crews all the way to Southern Africa in the last show.
It's your turn.
No, it's my turn.
I can intervene the way you do.
Yeah, we need to be winding up.
I can add something the way you do.
Yes. No. Yeah, it profits your turn, but be very brief as well.
I think you disordered the order.
Professor Kagwaja intervenes, but he doesn't want anybody else to intervene.
Yes,
this is not right.
We broke the hegemony from there.
You are so intimidated by this.
No, I'm not. No. He interrupts every time and we let him do it. And when I do it is intimidation? No. Not fair.
Okay, let him have his head right now.
I think you need a red card.
I need a red card. No, my bell is here. This is for Hashi as well.
So Kagwanja too
as well. Okay, let's wind up.
Very good. I think it's good to humor up the discussion. Yes. It can be very heavy. Now, I think there are two issues here. If you look at Gabon, it's also part of the coup belt that is emerging. We have Mali, French, Burkina Faso, French, Niger, French, Guinea, French, Chad, French. Gabon, French. Now, so there's a trend to this, and
they are still holding.
Chad they are what we are calling popular and unpopular coup. But the question is popular to who and unpopular to who. Chad was a popular, these are popular coups to us, the rest of Africa. Chad was a popular coup to France. Yes. And it was supported by France. Right. So there are ideological underpinnings of this. Now, what is causing these coups? First, is because we are in the final phase of the liberation of the French Empire in Africa. This is the final phase, the economic part of it. How is that? If you go to the agreement that was done at independence, which the Kutu lady refused, and Mali tried to refuse, and somehow lost it, was that France would retain 80% of the income from its former colonies. It's going to own all the resources under the soil, and it is going to station its army. Those are among the agreement.
And the foreign exchange be kept in France.
And foreign exchange will be kept in France. And if any colony, even of the former colony, want to access that, it can only access 20% and at interest, at an interest rate. I have never seen worse form of colonialism than that. That you only have 40% of your resources, and 50% of it has to be taxed.
Thank you.
Now, so that's one comment. The second is that
let's reserve that for next week, because this is a developing story. We need to wind up.
Yes.
Let's just begin with your headline thoughts. I'm pinched for time.
My highlight thoughts are that I think Wagner is here to stay, with or without its leader.
Its leader.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Let's hear from Ambassador. Your closing remarks, please.
I think, El Nino is being talked about a lot. It's also a national security that is coming. I just hope that as a country, we are preparing because it can be a blessing, but also it can bring devastation.
Mine is just very quick. The PS Foreign Affairs should look very quickly at what's going on in Hargeisa and what's going on in the middle parts of Somalia, where the Shabab essentially defeated a group of Somali army, and there was a huge war in Las Ano just last day before yesterday. Somalia is regressing back, and we need to keep our eyes on that country.
Indeed. All right, Dr. Khanenje, your closing remarks.
Whether it's external power or local leaders seeking power, we should always remember that the arc of history is long, and it always bends towards justice. And sooner or later, the chickens may come home to roost.
Right, thank you very much. And of course, that's the latest that we have on Global Today, looking at the global affairs as well. This being the latest, if my director may just pick up on that. And I know we'll be having that story on News Diary and News Center as well. Gabon military officers declare coup after Ali Bongo wins disputed election, as reported there by The Guardian. Televised announcement comes after electoral authorities said presidential incumbent had won third term in office. And that is upsetting the apple carts. For the last 53 years, they have been hanging on power, but it had to take a coup. Right now, we shall be also unpacking this and anatomize it next week. Thank you for your valued company. I want to thank our panelists this morning. Ahmed Hashi, our governance and policy analyst, Ambassador Rasas Mwencha, who is